Hello and welcome to Kill Team Forge. I'm your host, Talker Person, and today we are building. It's that thing you have to do before you can play, and some people see it as a tedious or even intimidating chore. It's not very difficult and it doesn't take special tools. If you don't want to watch a YouTube video and you just want to get to building your kill team, then here's some quick basics. Use straight edge-to-edge cutters like diagonal pliers, wire cutters, or even nail clippers. Don't use scissors or shears. Use a razor blade, like an X-Acto knife or a box cutter. Use super glue, probably super glue gel. Make sure you're working on a surface that you can't stab through or cut through on accident. And that rounds out the basics. But if you want a little more explanation, advice, tips, tricks, things to avoid, keep watching, I get into all of that. Starting with your work surface. You want to work somewhere that's comfortable and that's well lit. And then you have a few different options as to what surface you actually work on. The conventional choice will be a cutting mat, and that's something you can get just about anywhere. They're available at craft stores and hardware stores and office supply stores and online, and this is a really common choice because this is what the product is for. It is a safe surface to craft on with sharp blades as well as chemicals like glue. But if you don't already own a cutting mat and you don't want to buy anything, you have other options. Another common choice is a cutting board like you would use for your kitchen. I wouldn't recommend switching back and forth between using something for your models and using something for the kitchen. With plastics and with glues, they're just toxins you don't want to cross-contaminate surfaces you eat off of or prepare food on. But the cutting board itself, if you decide to bring an old cutting board from the kitchen and make it a crafting cutting board, will serve the purpose perfectly. Another good option that you probably have around the house is just old hardcover books. A hardcover book makes a great makeshift lap desk if you're sitting on a couch or somewhere like that where you don't have a good hard surface available. And then if you don't have a cutting mat and don't want to damage any hardcover books that you might have, another option you'll probably have around the house is just a sturdy cardboard box. Now, you want it to be a box, not just a sheet of cardboard, because when you're pressing down with a razor blade, it's really easy to puncture just a single sheet. So use a box with at least some thickness, ideally a little bit longer than your blade's length, just to be sure, but just, up 2 layers, it should be fine. So whether you end up working on a cutting mat, or a cutting board, or a hardcover book, or a cardboard box, or any other option we didn't talk about that you can cut on safely, it's time to start cutting stuff. In order to cut the fine details of these intricate plastic miniatures, you want a blade with a razor edge, whether that's an X-Acto blade in a craft holder or a utility knife with a full-size razor blade. You want it to be a razor blade. They can look a few different ways. You could have box cutters or disposable razor blades. Just make sure it's a razor blade, not a more common household knife that's great for all sorts of tasks but doesn't have that precision edge for such small details. You'll use that blade to cut, slice, trim, and shave, but you'll want a different tool to clip. Most kill team pieces come attached to a larger rectangular plastic frame called a sprue, and removing the pieces to build your models from those sprues is something you'll usually want to do with clippers. Now, these could be precision wire cutters or the bulkier diagonal cutters, even the cutters that are in the back edge of regular pliers, or even nail clippers. Really anything with sharp blades that meet edge to edge. This is in contrast to something like scissors or shears where the blades pass by each other. If you try to use something like that, cutting these little plastic pieces, what will end up happening are the plastic connections, instead of snipping off and popping your pieces free, they'll sort of get twisted and mangled between those crossing blades. So don't use scissors or shears. They'll just cause you a lot of frustration and probably ruin some models. Instead, find a nice pair of edge-to-edge cutters, whatever variety you choose. Pair that with your razor blade, and that's all the cutting you need. So you've got everything you need to cut your pieces off the sprue and clean them up. Whoop, excuse me while I use this super secret bonus tool to open my drink. Now you need glue to put them all together. You're going to want super glue and you're going to want super glue gel. When you get past simple model assembly and move on to decorative basing, you'll also want plain white all-purpose glue. But for building the models, just super glue gel will be perfect. Where I see people go wrong with their glue choice is choosing too strong a glue. Something like industrial glue or construction glue, they will be strong enough, but they're going to be miserable for you to work with. They're going to be sticky, they're going to get on your fingertips, they take longer to set. Strength is not your concern here. These pieces of plastic are very, very light. Superglue gel will give you all the holds you need, as well as the application control to not drive yourself crazy. Likewise, someone might choose wood glue to use for their basing because they think, oh, wood is heavy, wood glue is strong. But wood glue is designed to bond two pieces of wood together with their pores. All-purpose white glue will do a better job holding a variety of materials to a plastic base. So, with your cutting surface, your cutting tools, and your glue, you have all the tools that are necessary in order to build Kill Team models. But there are still a couple tools that might help you with a nicer finished result or help you in your process to get there. And one of those is a simple file for smoothing out surfaces. You can use a nail file, or I happen to have this precision file set for my wood shop. So while a file definitely isn't necessary, it can help save you some hassle rather than using, say, your razor blade to shave down a smooth surface. These are all of the tools I would use to build and base a plastic Kill Team model. Now, there are two things out here that we haven't talked about yet. One is the toothpicks that I would just use to spread the white glue around when basing the model. And the other is the only specialist tool that I use to build Kill Team models. It's called a pin vise. It's essentially a very small hand drill, and it is used almost exclusively to just drill out the gun barrel holes on the models. Now that might seem like just a preposterously niche purpose, but I will say if you're going to post pictures of your models on the internet, or if you're going to let people see your models, for whatever reason, there is a fixation on whether or not the barrel holes in the guns have been drilled. People will notice it. People will comment on it. So I'm not saying it's right, but it's something that the modeling community seems to fixate on. I take care of it with my models. If you don't want the hassle of strangers commenting, oh, why didn't you drill out the barrel holes? Then a $7 pin vise from Amazon is what you need. And with that, that concludes our coverage on the tools involved in building Kill Team models. And now I'll build a model from start to finish so you can see every step involved. I'm going to go ahead and build a Death Guard Plague Marine Gunner with Plague Spewer. Building Games Workshop models in 2019, 2020 is easy. They provide these booklets with instructions. All of the pieces on the sprue are numbered, so you literally go into the booklet, see which pieces you need, cut them out, and assemble them. That's all there is to it. I don't know how frequently I might ever actually take a Plague Marine with Plague Spewer into a competitive game. Blight launchers are just so good. Death Guard only get 2 gunners, but it's great to have options, and Death Guard do have some really cool different weapons, like the Plague Spewer, like the Blight launcher, so having all those options available, I'm for it, even if it won't necessarily affect my tournament rosters very much. As you can see, I personally like to clip every piece off of the sprue and end up with the pile of pieces I'm actually going to use to assemble a model, but that procedural method is a lot better for building a single model like this. If you're building an entire box, what I'll tend to do is clip all the heads I'm going to use and get those to one side. Assemble all the torsos, that way I can quickly go from 0 models to the whole box being built. But for this demonstration, just building a single model, I want all the pieces I'm going to use in this pile, then I can get to work on them. And I know what you're thinking, wait, get to work on them, you've already clipped them out. Isn't all that's left gluing them together? That's not much work. Fair question, and if your only concern is building the models so you can play the game, that is all that's left to do, and you can do that very quickly. However, there is one extremely time-consuming step that really makes a big difference on the appearance of the finished model. I'm talking about cleaning up mold lines. Now, I don't mean mold like spores growing on your models, that is very Death Guard, but I'm talking about these lines left over from the production process where the molds were pressed together. They're also often called flash lines, and if you don't address them in the building process, then there's no way to minimize how visible they are later on down the line when you're priming and painting your models. Some of these flash lines run right across the face of a model or in some other visually crucial area. I always remove them. I understand not wanting to, especially if you have a large amount of models facing you. This is the step that takes all the time. But I just throw on a movie or a TV show, enjoy my beer, and kind of mindlessly take care of it. And I do that with a razor blade, just by running it along these flash lines, shaving them off. There might be a spot on a rounded like shoulder or knee where you might want to use your curved nail clippers rather than trying to approximate the perfect curve with your straight blade, but it's almost all razor blade work. Areas where you'll want to use an X-Acto, a number 11 style blade rather than the full-size razor blade, are very tight interior curves where you wouldn't be able to turn a full-size razor blade without the back edge hitting the piece. Another helpful thing to do while you're taking your knife to these different pieces of your model is to score the surfaces that you'll need to glue together later. These are really smooth, kind of slick plastic. You just carve a couple lines crisscrossing into them, and that'll help the pieces catch when you're gluing them later on. This is also the step that I would lump in drilling out any gun barrels on your model. The Plague Spewer has sort of a recessed triangular area, not a regular barrel, so I will be skipping it for this model. That would be lumped into this step as well. It's all just preparing these pieces for final assembly. And when it is gluing time, don't forget to shake up your glue if it says shake well. I like to glue together pairs of the pieces at once. That way I can glue one pair, move on to the next, and hopefully that way I can keep gluing, keep working, rather than waiting each step for the glue to hold and dry. When it comes to the actual gluing, before I put the glue on, I make sure the pieces can actually fit together. Because otherwise, if you've already applied the super glue to both surfaces and then find out they can't, it's just going to be a mess to deal with. When I say this is what I do, I mean this is what I should do every time, but I forget sometimes. Then I'm putting that thin layer of super glue on the surfaces I'm gluing, and then when I'm putting them together, really giving it a good press and hold. If you hold it together just for a few seconds to let that super glue bond and fuse, it becomes a hold you don't have to worry about again. And once you're finishing up gluing these pieces together, that's all there is to it. You will finish this model, and then you know more than you need to put together all the models in a kill team. Now that they're built, you can keep working on your models. You can base them, prime them, and then paint them. Or you can move straight to the table and get them in a game. Well, that's all there is to building, and that's the end of the episode. Thank you for joining us here at Kill Team Forge. And this holiday, if you want to spread the gift of Kill Team joy and get someone a nice box to get them started, if they're freaked out about having to build it, feel free to point them to this video. And subscribe or YouTube it, or whatever.